Welcome to Research Talk. I hope you all are doing well and enjoying our journey on qualitative research. So, we today we will talk about different forms of data which has been used which is being used in qualitative research. So, let's begin our conversation for today. Today we'll be talking about the data that is commonly used, such as interviews, observations, documents, artifacts, which are commonly used in qualitative research. So let's start with talking about interviews as a form of data which we commonly see in qualitative research. Interviews are really important, particularly if you remember that qualitative research is focused on understanding, exploring people's experiences, people's perceptions, people's attitude. So when you interview somebody, you get to know, you get to capture their experience as they have experienced the phenomenon that as a researcher I am investigating. So interviews are a very common, a very popular form of data used in qualitative research. So what kind of interviews are used in qualitative research? So the interviews could be synchronous or asynchronous in qualitative traditions. So when you think about synchronous interviews, further it can be, we can divide it in two categories where an asynchronous interview could be individual interview. Individual meaning that you are talking to one person and you are interviewing one person there. Or you can do interviews in a group format. We often call it focus group interviews. And similarly, not similarly, but asynchronous interviews are asynchronous, which means that as a researcher, you can send your questions and then the person will send their answers. So it doesn't happen like in real time. So individual interviews further can happen like in online format, such as Zoom or any other video format which is being commonly used, or it could happen in person. So you can interview your research participant in an online medium, and after COVID, this trend is sort of has increased. And this is useful, particularly if your participants are located at a different location where you are located. So if I'm in Jacksonville and if I'm interviewing somebody in California, obviously if I do in-person interviews, it will cost money. I need to travel there and then get the interview done. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time as well. However, I can use the technology and I can interview people at different geographic locations, different countries, different parts of the same country, and interview them using video platforms such as Zoom. With online interviews, the one limitation that I have observed as a researcher is you lack non-verbal data, because when you are interviewing somebody on a computer screen, you only see like this frame of the person, right? You don't see any other like the body language, overall body language. So that's one limitation that we see when you conduct online interviews. While in-person interviews, you have more richer data in terms of capturing the nonverbals of the person you are interviewing. Now let's talk about group interviews or focus group interviews. Focus group interviews are also very popular form of data which is used in qualitative research. And in focus group, again, you can do it online or in person. Same thing with Zoom interviews. If you're doing it online, you can have all the participants, maybe from different locations, joining it in this group meeting, focus group meeting, and you can conduct your interviews there. And again, the same limitations that I talked about with technology, like lack of nonverbals or maybe limited nonverbals. Again, in person, you can have your interviews in person and get the data in a group interview format. Asynchronous, as I said previously, interviews are, let's say if I send email, I can email my questions to my research participant and they can read the questions, they can write their responses and email that back to me. Or I can even like mail them. So I can print my questions on a sheet and mail it to my research participant and they can write their responses or maybe uh, type their responses and mail it back to me. So when it comes to interviews as a data form, it could be synchronous or asynchronous. Now, when you think about interviews, in terms of the structure of the interview could be of three types of interviews. So, structured interview, semi-structured interview, and unstructured interview. So, what is an structured interview? In a structured interview, as a researcher, you write your questions in one order: question number one, question number two, question number three, four, etc. And then you interview your participant in the same order. So these interviews, structured interviews, obviously they are formal in nature, and then you have questions which are like same questions, same order, and you ask these questions to your participants. So one thing to keep in mind when you are doing a structured interview is structured interviews, let's say you have participant 1, participant 2, participant 3, participant 4, and then you ask the questions, same question that you have predetermined in the same order, and then you compare the responses across participants so that you could know how these people are responding to these exact questions. So structured questions are very structured in nature, in the sense the question is already predetermined, they are asked in the same order, and then your focus as an interviewer is to analyze the responses as well as compare and contrast those responses. With semi-structured interview, they are again like the structured one, formal in nature, and the questions are not asked like in the same order. So semi-structured are like you have sort of set of open-ended question, and you ask these questions, but not necessarily in the same order. It's a very, like when you are with your participant, you want to cover the key themes of those questions, and but you are not like very fixed in that format. So it's like you can start with maybe question number 2 with one participant, not with question number 1. uh, and when you are asking these questions, you also do further follow-up question, probing questions. So when a participant, let's say you ask your first open-ended question, and then the participants is answering that question, and then you may notice I want some more clarification about something the participant has shared, and then you ask for the follow-up questions. And once you have a very thorough contextual answer with all the information about the question, you move to the next question. Or maybe you can come back to previous question based on if some new information or new clarification you need. So semi-structured uh, interviews are somewhat structured in the sense that you already have a set of open-ended questions, and these questions are mostly about the phenomenon that different themes, different aspects of the phenomenon that you are investigating, and then you ask these questions not necessarily in the same order, and also you ask further follow-up questions, probing questions to get a very comprehensive perspective experience of your research participant. Now let's move to the unstructured interview. Unstructured interviews are informal in nature, and there is no fixed question. So how interviews happen if uh, there is no quite fixed question? So basically, in unstructured interview, as a researcher, you frame your questions primarily from the focus of your research actually. So whatever is the purpose statement or the purpose of your study, based on that main theme, you ask your questions, and the conversation is more informal, and you follow the lead of your participants. So that's why we call it unstructured questions. Let's understand it with an example. Let's say I want to understand the integration of immigrant, integration of immigrants experience, sorry, immigrants experiences. In fact, I should write it other way around actually. So let me rub it off and write it again. So let's say I'm interested in understanding immigrants' experiences of integration in a culture, in a country or a culture. So, and if I have to do an interview uh, for these immigrant participants in my study, and my focus is obviously understanding their experiences of how that integration process looks like to them. So I want to focus, so the key purpose or focus of this research is understanding the experiences, challenges, and strategies that immigrants are using in terms of their integration in another country or culture. So when I start my unstructured interview, I will be focusing on, like, okay, tell me your journey of coming to this culture. What was the first time when you thought about coming to this country? And then I can start the conversation from there, and then I can focus on what were some of the challenges that they faced, and what were some of the strategies that they adopted in that process. So you see, I do not have a set of questions, but I have a theme. I have some key themes that I want to focus on while doing the interviews. So that's how unstructured interview looks like. Another thing to keep in mind is what form of interview um, you are going to use for your study depends on obviously the logistics and your resources that you have at your disposal, and also the objective of the study. In majority of the qualitative research where interview is used as a form of data, I have seen that semi-structured interviews are very popular method of collecting data. And the reason is, as you see, semi-structured interviews are structured to a certain extent, but not completely structured. And they are unstructured in the sense that you have further follow-up questions which might arise during the interview. So in my own experience conducting qualitative research, I have always used semi-structured interview, which does not mean that one should always do that. It should be determined based on your objective and the resources at your disposal. So that's briefly about interviews as a form of data in qualitative research. Thank you and see you again.